is Kaduna Book and Arts Festival 2022. My name is Omotoke Solarin-Sodara. Welcome to my book chat with Mr. Leye Adenle. Before we begin, I would like to announce that there will be a Q&A session after my book chat with the author. So if you have any questions, you can please write them down and the author will be excited to answer them after our book chat. So briefly, I would like to read Mr. Leye Adenle's bio, if you will let me. So Mr. Leye Adenle is the author of Easy Motion Tourist, which won the Prix Marine in 2016. He's a contributor to the critically acclaimed anthologies Lagos Noir and Sunshine Noir. He was also shortlisted for the 2017 CWA Short Story Dagger. And The Beautiful Side of the Moon is his third novel. Welcome once again, Mr. Leye. I'm very happy to be discussing with you today. But before I start, I want to talk about how I felt about the book. So I have read The Beautiful Side of the Moon 1001 times. And one thing for sure that I know is that the characters are not just hilarious, but they are also very relatable. I mean, at some time in our lives, I'm sure we've all been like Osaterin, trying to figure out ourselves and all that. So that's something I can really resonate with. Aside from that, I love the pace of the novel. I like the way it was just giving us at the end of every chapter. It was just amazing. And your imagination, you literally took us to another world entirely. And that was something I really, really love to see. So thank you, Leye, for writing such an amazing, amazing, amazing novel.
Thank you so much.
I really did enjoy it. So I would like to start with the questions because I'm very, very curious about a lot of things. So as you know, I've been following you for a very long time since you wrote Easy Motion Tourist and since your Chronicles of a Runs Girl online. So you said once in an interview that it is high time that African literature went beyond literary fiction and started expanding into genre fiction. So I want to know that is it for this reason that you decided to write speculative fiction?
Yes, actually, I wrote the book because I had nieces and nephews who were very young at the time, and they couldn't read any of my other books because they were quite adult in content.
Okay.
So I wanted to write something that they could relate to and they could read without lying to their parents about what they're reading. And I also wanted to write something that resembled the kind of stories that I read as a child or that I was told. Genre fiction has existed in Africa forever. If you think of the stories of Anansi, the spider or the tortoise and all of that, it's kind of genre fiction. If you think of the stories of Fagua, of Akarogu, the one translated by Wole Soyinka, First of a Thousand Demons, I think it's called. If you think
Yeah,
about
My Life in the Forest of a Thousand Demons.
yeah,
Something. Yeah, I read it.
absolutely, that's genre fiction. That's fantasy, or if you care, sometimes it's actually sci-fi because you're encountering this African pre-colonial protagonists who have all these objects that can do amazing things. You know, one interpretation is it's magic. Another interpretation is it's technology that is far beyond our time for us to be able to understand and explain. So therefore, it becomes magic. But it could also be sci-fi. So I think it's time that we rediscovered our unique talent for genre fiction. Our folk tales, our moral stories, and all of that, they are actually, if you think about it, types of genre fiction, I think.
Okay, so speaking of, you mentioned the idea of sci-fi, magic, and all that being as part of story fiction. One thing I know for sure is that The Beautiful Side of the Moon totally asks the reader to look beyond like what is familiar and what is usual. In the novel, you write about magic, aliens, shape-shifting villains, different dimensions, and even time travel. So I want to know how hard was it? Like, was it hard to include all these unearthly phenomena in your story?
Not really, I was having fun. I've heard other writers talk about their process and describe writing as a very difficult endeavor, very lonely,
Mm-hmm.
very, very tough and everything. And I respect their views. I respect the way they come to their own art. But for me, it's fun. you write because you enjoy it. The same reason we read. I think to be a writer, you probably have been a reader. Every reader, I believe, can be a writer. And it's the same kind of joy you get from reading a good book that you get from writing. So for me, I was just having fun, really. I have a theory that you can tell when the author has enjoyed writing the story. It's going to be fun. It's going to have different elements in it. It's like someone cooking the ultimate ilasipo. It's a vibe. You're just like, you know what? Periwinkles can go in this, and Bomo can go in this, and let me see what spices I can ginger this up with. Oh, ginger, I can put that in it. And if you're mad enough, let's see what happens if I add some saffron into that. But it's a vibe. You're experimenting, but you're also experimenting based on the flow. It just comes to you naturally what's going to fit, what's not going to fit. And if it doesn't work, you just start over again.
This part, you tell yourself this is something you.
Thank you so much for that. So speaking of these ingredients that you were talking about, periwinkles and all, I can see that you've actually use that to create an entirely new way of seeing the world. You take us to a fictional village, for example, Fakafiki. So I want to know, what was the inspiration for Fakafiki? First of all, I love the name. I love how it sounds in my mouth. But I want to know, what was your inspiration for that village, Fakafiki?
I'd like to say something very intelligent and very profound about how I came up with this village. And I just like the name Fakafiki. It's something I that's been part of my Niger vocabulary since I was growing up, and I wanted to use it. It came to me when I came to writing the part of the story where they go into this amazing magical village that turns out not to be a village. I'm trying not to give away the story. Yeah, so there's really nothing profoundly intelligent to say about that other than it felt like a good name. It felt like another lovely ingredient.
How did the name come to you? How did it come to you?
I think it's a Yoruba word.
You think? You're not sure?
Yeah, I think it's one of those filler words.
It sounds more like a sound to me. Fakafiki.
Yeah, it's like somehow, I don't know, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who's thinking, you don't know what Fakafiki is?
I think I would say that if I meet somebody outside, I would say, oh, I come from Fakafiki. You know what it is. That's something I would say. I actually really love it so much.
Yeah. And actually, if you think about it, right, the city itself, Fakafiki itself it makes a point. It's a statement. I'm sure you know what I mean. You haven't been close to the work. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about my favorite character. And I hope that when people read this book too, they love him just as much as I do. That's Osaterin Osagiwe Agbo. I hope I pronounced it well. So in the first chapter, readers are introduced to Osaterin. He works in IT. He's a Lagos boy, lucky guy. But his self-doubt and naivety kind of endeared the readers to share in his emotional turbulence as he discovers who he really is. So I want to know, why did you choose Osaterin as your protagonist? Why did you choose him as your narrator?
The entire book itself is kind of a riddle. The story itself,
Yes.
And we get to know who he is eventually, not because we're told directly that this is who he is. All the elements are there till the very end. We're picking up hints and clues about his real identity and who this person is. And because of who Osaterin is, only Osaterin can tell Osaterin's story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah. But with regards to the name Osaterin, I have an amazing friend called Osaterin. And when I started writing this character, his face was the face I saw. So it was only natural that I used his name as well.
Has he read the book?
I'm not sure. He's read everything else I've written.
But he has not read this one that has his name on it.
Yeah, I'll try and get him to come to Arcade this year.
Okay. I'll have to actually meet him. I will. Because I'm sure in a way he's kind of fashioned the same way. And I think he's a very interesting character. So he'll definitely be an interesting person to meet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I noticed something while I was reading The Beautiful Side of the Moon. It's more about Osaterin and his upbringing, his relationship with his parents. So we can see that there's a huge difference between Osariten's relationship with his father and his mother. So he lost his father when he was 13 and could barely remember the man who used to perform tricks for him. And then his mother showed him very little affection during his formative years. That thing stuck with me. I can't relate, but it did stick with me because I've met friends who have their mothers or their parents not really showing them that much love. So did this awareness, or should I say sense of abandonment, contribute to Osariten's shortcomings? Was he like a product of his upbringing?
Yes, like we all are, really. We are the product of our parents' experimentation with bringing us up. With Osarati, the circumstances of his birth, who his parents are, without giving anything away, they know who he is,
Yeah.
even if he doesn't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And because they know who he is, they know he's going to be okay. They know I don't need to pick this child up when this child falls, and when this child throws a tantrum, it's going to be okay because I know you. So that's the idea of that detachment that his mom seemed to have. However, it was also an opportunity to look at the relationship of a child in their formative years with their parents, and then the resultant adults they become.
Mm-hmm.
So we do find that Osarati has been deeply affected by the lack of emotional attention from his mother, which is only a human thing. So I try to do something throughout the book in specific situations where, with Osarati, we look at the humanness of him. And I used every situation he found himself in to reveal something more about just a human experience that is, common to all of us. While he's still going on this magical journey, is still as human as we all are. And if you think about it, right, it's important for him to be as human as you and I, and to be Nigerian, or better still, to be non-American, because
Yeah.
all the movies we've watched, it's Americans who come and save the world. When this one, we find that the people who are called upon to save humanity are not American action heroes. They are people that look like you and I. So it was important to really connect with that very human, very normal part of who he is. He's a nerd.
Yeah, he's a very funny nerd. Okay, still on this question, Leia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way I look at it is Osaritin's mother not showing him that much affection causes him to kind of look for that wherever he can get among the women in his life, most especially Adesua. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. He was constantly seeking
Yeah,
something, but he
yeah.
wasn't quite sure what it was, but he was seeking it. And yeah, even his relationship with Brother Moses,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
as it slowly evolved, you can see that as more of a parental figure as well, because he grew up in the circumstances under which he grew up. So yeah, you're right about that as well.
Let's go into your imagination. I want to go into your mind. So Osaritin and Rachel at first are in denial. They refuse to accept that another world exists aside from what they are actually used to. So do you think that humans have a hard time accepting what is unfamiliar? And also, how did you think readers will react to your book, given that they live mostly on the diet of literary and commercial fiction, but your book is literally out of this world. So how do you think readers will act to that, being that it's something they are not also used to as well?
I'll take the second question first. How would people react to it? If you think about it, right, the classics that we are all used to, literature in English mostly, they're not all literary fiction, even if they seem to be. In their times, they were popular fiction. It was what everybody was reading. Frankenstein is not literary fiction, even if it was written in the language of the time. Neither was Bram Stoker's Dracula, and a lot of other stories. Do people have a hard time accepting what's not familiar to them? Yes, absolutely. If you think about it, if I'm brought up Christian,
Okay.
which I didn't choose, it was forced upon me at birth. Maybe they even, as a kid, did some waterboarding for me in the name of baptism. and then forced upon me a foreign name that is like a stamp of the people that enslaved my people, and then I'm called Paul or something, right? I didn't choose it, but when I come in contact with people who are Buddhist or Muslim or anything else, and if I'm so inclined and I get into arguments with them about whose God is the real God, I will strongly believe, every fiber of my being would believe that the Christian God and the Bible and Jesus who enjoyed turning water to wine is the truth. Now, why would I believe this? Is it that I cannot reason for myself? Is it that I cannot study and learn? That the more we learn about religious books, the more we realize that this stories are mostly made up. But it is because I've been fed this truth, as it were, since I was a child. It has become hardwired into my neural network, into my brain, right? So when I come against a challenging fact or opinion, it would affect me. I would have cognitive dissonance, right? It wouldn't make sense. I won't be able to hold those two truths in my head at the same time. So, at a physical level, at least in your brain, we find it difficult to accept other realities that have not become part of our worldview based on our environment, our upbringing, and stuff like that. So are there other worlds out there? Absolutely. There are other dimensions. Science has told us this for a million times. Are we insignificant in the grand scheme of things? We are so utterly and totally insignificant that if you start to contemplate the insignificance of our tiny rock, it it can affect you, it can affect your mentality, your mental health, but we are unable to think as humans. We find it difficult to think in ways that would threaten to pull the ground up from under our feet. It's almost like we have a kill switch, right? You stop thinking, you stop being rational and exploring thoughts to the logical conclusion once it starts to unravel the world that we all have a map of reality, right? Nobody's map of reality is reality, but we have a map of reality that we use to navigate the world. My map of reality is so important to me because that's the only way the world makes sense. So if I'm being shown something that challenges that very map of reality that says to me it's wrong, it's a matter of survival, of self-preservation for me, for my body, my entire being to fight that new piece of truth and not want to accept it. And politicians are very good at using that to make us.
Wow. Okay. You just said something that stuck to me now, that you believe that there are other universes out there. So in this chapter in the book, Through an Infant's Eyes, we see that Titus takes Osaterin to see different worlds, different parallel universes and all. So I want to know why you added this to the book. Not just because, is it just because you believe in it, or was it a curiosity about those other universes that influence this part of the story?
That part of the story where Osaterin is picked up from the wilderness in which has been left to die.
Let's not give them spoilers. Oh, they have to read our book first. They cannot know what happened.
All right, so that part of the story, do I believe it? I believe absolutely. Look, see what the James Webb Telescope is showing us, right? We live in a universe that is expanding, that is much more vast than we can possibly imagine. A universe where our sun, which is the largest thing in our own little system, is like a speck of dust if you look at some of the larger structures out there, right? There are suns that would take millions of our own sun. That's mind-boggling, right? So it is quite possible to imagine that there are civilizations that live an entire lifetime on a speck of dust. It's entirely possible that we look in a microscope to study the very minute, the very little life forms. What if we're also, in relation to other life forms, that minute life form?
Ah,
The same way
okay.
Milba cannot contemplate us, right? What if
Mm-hmm.
there are things that we cannot contemplate? What if bacteria or virus, we see how viruses mutate and how they sometimes they control the host to change the host's behavior to do things that will benefit them. So a virus infects a rat, and then the rat suddenly finds it wants to go and mess around with cats and be swallowed by cats. But it's because the virus, needs something in the digestive system of the cat, right? It's interesting. But then when we look at this at a virus under a microscope, we can draw it out, and this is what it is, and it doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have science. It doesn't have culture. It doesn't have Tinder. It doesn't have Instagram. But what if we're wrong? What if the only things we see are the things that our science allows us to see, right? What if,
Mm.
just like the atom was only three things before, but they keep finding there's more levels to it? What if everything out there that we can see, which is expanding, the universe and all of that, is not actually all there is? We simply don't know the answers to this. But one thing we do know is it's a terrible possibility. It can be true. In the vastness of time and space, anything is possible. And
Yeah.
also, we know that there are more dimensions than the ones we physically interact with, right? And dimensions beyond our ability to detect, right, will almost forever be unknown to us. But those dimensions will still affect us. Even if we're not aware of them in terms of we can physically interact with them and detect or understand the ways in which these other dimensions affect us, even though we're oblivious of them, they still affect us. Even though ants and insects and stuff are oblivious, they don't know we exist, but we affect them. Now, take those two relative sizes, an ant to a human, and then expand both of them, right? Make the ant a million times smaller, make the human a million times larger. That's possible. It can be. It can be that that actually exists, and that's another reality we don't know about. But when you start thinking in such ways, interesting things happen. If you're a religious person, then your brain tells you that, nope, this is against the Bible and this is not possible. Yeah. Thank God for scientists. Thank God for people who actually continue to seek the truth and seek knowledge and challenge what's known today and look for, the unknown. And one day would learn more.
Okay. Speaking of religion, I don't want to give spoilers because this question, oh my goodness, it was kind of. Ugh. I just want to know you explored some parts of religion in your book, The Beautiful Side of the Moon. So I want to know what parts of your beliefs are actually present in the book without giving spoilers. I know it's not easy because this part is very. But what parts of your beliefs, your religious beliefs, are actually present in The Beautiful Side of the Moon?
I'm an agnostic person, which is what I say to Nigerians, because if you say you're atheist, then you're the devil. And any chance of finding a Nigerian partner is gone because who wants to raise
Ah.
a
Who says? No, now.
because with us Nigerians, right? Especially in the institution of marriage, the fear of God is the beginning of faithfulness. That's what we believe.
Seriously. A lot of us are open minded, actually, to shock you. A lot of us are actually open minded.
No, it wouldn't shock me because I know there's my tribe out there. If this is the way I am, there's other people like me. However, where I differ from or where my real tribe is that I accept that I could be wrong. So I think it's actually a bit meaningless to, in terms of religion, the question of God and gods and all of those, whether or not we were created and all of that. I think it's a meaningless question. I think it's meaningless because we will be gone one day, and when we're gone, we're gone. We never existed. And I'm not just talking about the single human. All of humanity will be gone, and there'll be no record of our existence. We're that insignificant. So all our wars and battles and our stupid borderlines and all of that crap, all of the people we cancel and our viral challenges and all of that, it'll be gone. And if you read the Bible, it's acknowledged in Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. I've sought to seek what is right to do in this world under the sun, and I've discovered that the only thing that is worthy of time, of the way you spend your life here, is to eat, drink, and be merry. So that's my religion.
Okay. I like it. I love it. Okay, so I want to talk about good and evil now. So in your novel, The Great Schism represents the line between good and evil. Then I did my research, like a very curious person that I am, and I found out that the Great Schism came about due to the complex mix of religious disagreements and political conflicts between the Western region and the Eastern region. So did you, by chance, draw your inspiration from these events, or did you just say, "Oh, Great Schism sounds really nice. Let me add it to my book"? I just want to know if it's related.
Again, you don't want me to give away anything, and I don't want to.
Yes.
But if you look at the book, The Great Schism, The White Death, so many other things, if you decide to go read more about them, you'll discover stuff. And that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, I'll read more about this so I can discover stuff. Okay, so while I was reading the chapter Omopidon, which actually means child of a magician, it kind of took me back to my childhood in Lagos, where I used to see men performing magic tricks on the road, basically with handkerchiefs, sometimes cards. So seeing that you actually reference this in your book, do you actually believe in magic? Do you believe that these things do actually exist, like magic itself?
There's a character in the book, Professor Achuko, who's actually modeled on a great magician.
Grandest, I mean, great grandma.
Yeah, it's actually based on Professor Pella, who is,
Okay.
I think, today the most celebrated magician we've ever had. He had, I'm sure there's videos of some of his shows on YouTube. And I grew up in roughly the same neighborhood as him. You know, this great magician, this family of magicians, and now very, very important politicians as well. And his shows used to be sold out. And I think his wife or his wives were his assistants. And there was this trick he did once where in a packed hall, you know, the trick where you put your assistant into what
A
looks like a,
box, and then you try to
yeah.
cut them.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a time that Professor Pella did this, and then something went wrong as he's trying to saw into his wife. And the
Oh,
audience realized, only, you know, so something's gone wrong, and the audience is really paying attention. What's gone wrong? And they could see the worry on Pella's face, and they could see that he was struggling and he was like afraid. And then he digs his hands into this box and he brings out his entrails, the intestines, this bloody mess, and then everybody runs away. I think that's the most amazing trick, because in that moment alone, it convinced people that not only do magicians actually physically saw people in half, but it could go wrong. And the fact that it can go wrong and you can actually cut them up and look at the entrails, look at, look at the mess, of course, and put them back together. And so strong was this belief that in Bodija, where I grew up, we used to say of the goats, so we would have some stray goats that would walk around Pella's house. We said those were the young boys that went to go and see his daughters. And he had turned them into goats.
hope he didn't try to go and see his one of his daughters.
Sure. And become a son. No way.
I really like, that thing just reminded me of something in the book. I remember when they went to Fakafiki and the villagers there were like that. This is where the youth compassion tried to toast our girls ended up when they pointed to the roof. Did that come from there or is just a coincidence?
Probably came from that.
Really? I love it. Yeah. And I even saw the connection. I love it. Nice. Okay. So one of the things I love about the book. Okay, I'm listening.
I was going to say, do I believe in magic? Absolutely. But then what's magic? Before the Wright brothers decided to attempt powered flight, to fly was magical. Before we had the internet or telephones, it was magic. A lot of the things that over 400 years of the slave trade and colonial rule and all of that, a lot of the things that we had achieved, right, have now become magic because we no longer understand how it was done, so it cannot be replicated, so it becomes magic. But there is also magic that happens around us every day. I think it is magical that people fall in love, for example, and that even though we can recreate the emotion of love by just giving you the right chemicals, people still believe in it. I think that's magical. I also think it's magical that people still go to churches and give their money to religious institutions run by billionaire pastors.
Uh-uh.
Think about it, right? It's some kind of magic that these pastors have perfected. If they can sell you salvation and protection, but they go about in armored cars and they have bodyguards, I think there's something magical about the fact that they can get people to believe in them. Yeah, but I do believe in other magics. I mean, I believe it's magical that we wake up with all our thoughts from the days before, that all our memory is still intact. I think it's magical that, we're talking right now about this book. I think life itself is magical. We just need to identify the magic in our everyday lives. And yeah, magic is real.
So, one of the things I really did love about Wizard of the Monastic, I think I've said this before, is that it's, first of all, it's not really based off trauma. It's just a very, very amazing, like, fun loving book, taking us to like different places and different worlds. So the language you employ in the book is actually very accessible. Basically anybody can actually read it and understand it. Then the tone of your story is playful, and each chapter is very poetic. I mean, we have Red Wine and Familiar Spirit, we have Fakafiki, we have Twenty Fat Eyes, we have Red Wing Day. Very, very lovely chapter titles. So was it deliberate for you to employ this style in your writing, or was it the genre that kind of influenced this?
I think you'll find the same style, the same deliberate style in all of my writing. And why? I love people who write amazing prose. I enjoy beautiful prose. However, I prefer books that really gets me into the fictive dream. And I stop knowing that I'm reading a book. I'm totally transported into the world that the author has created. I think you can only, one way, not you can only, but one way to achieve that is for the author to get out of the way. So I think my job as a
Okay.
writer is out of the way, to not be there, to let the story be told by the characters, by their actions. I'm not seeking to impress my reader with my grasp of language. I'm not trying to impress them with how I can spend 20 words to describe the smell of summer, of Hamatan. I find it jarring when I'm reading and I'm listening to the writer. I would rather read a book that I'm just lost. I'm in that world, right? I don't hear my phone ring, or I'm in that world until I smell smoke from the kitchen and I realize I've bought see.
Has
And I
that
don't,
happened to you before?
yeah, it has. I tell you what's happened to me before. So until this happened to me as well, I didn't realize how bad it was. I always say the joy you get from reading is the same joy you get from writing, but multiplied by infinity. So
Mm.
with my ex-partner, I would be writing after, so I would usually write in the evenings, and they would call me, and I'll be like, oh, so how you doing? Sorry, I'm writing. Let me call you when I finish this chapter. And maybe that's at 7 o'clock. Then the next time I look up, it's midnight.
Mm.
Because you're in the state of flow and time just goes. You're totally
Goes.
in what I'm totally in the world, right? And I'm writing, thinking, what's Osaterin going to do next? And I didn't understand the effect it had on her until one day I called a writer friend of mine up randomly, and they picked up and said, Leia, sorry, I'm writing right now. Let me call you back. Yeah, but yeah, it's intentional. I want to tell the story. I want to tell it as truthfully, as accurately as possible. I am not trying to impress you with my massive vocabulary. I'm not trying to impress you with my dexterity with the English language or any other language. If I wanted to write a book that was lyrical, that it was about the prose, I'll write a Yoruba book. I'll write in Yoruba because Yoruba is beautiful. If I
Yeah.
could speak Shekiri, I'd love to write in that language, you know. But there you are.
That'll be fun to see. That'll be fun to see. Okay, so I noticed that there is a cinematic atmosphere to the novel. It kind of reads like a movie. So most especially the fight scenes in Cool Moon Fire and Red Rain Day. So do you have any plans for a screen adaptation?
I've sold the options to the book, and also that cinematic quality you speak of is also down to the style of writing. You know,
Yeah. We're going to get a movie.
movie or series, one of the two.
Very excited.
Yeah.
That's nice. Speaking of the movie quality, actually, I noticed that while reading the book, the first few chapters are like really long. Then when it gets to the towards the end, the chapters get shorter, and that's where like most of the fight scenes are kind of like as fast paced as it is in movies. Was that deliberate, or did it just happen as you were just writing the chapter? You're like, let me just break this into two or something.
It's both deliberate and resultant. If you think of heartbeats, right? So I'm watching
Mm.
a horror movie. What's going to happen? And then as I get deeper into the story, my heartbeat raises. You know, it becomes faster. And it's the same
Mm.
thing. So as the action begins to unravel towards the end, you need, you know, if you watch if Hollywood does it perfectly, right? The fight scene, right? The fight scene is not one long fight scene. They always have two
Mm.
fight scenes, right? So they go from the main fight scene to another fight scene, and then they come back to this and they go back to that. And that choppiness, that quick motion is how things happen, is how crazy stuff happens. Everything happens at the same time, you know, when it's madness happening. And I think it's both natural, of spectacle, of craziness when it's happening. And also it's intentional because the chapters will get shorter because it gets punchier. We've spent
Yeah.
building up everything, but now here's a reward for sitting through all of that building, and here's what really happens. And then a lot happens in a short time. And using the shorter chapters also helps that, I believe.
Mm. Okay. So there was one character I was really intrigued by. That was Adesua, because she's smart, she's strong-willed, and she does not send Osaterin, which breaks my heart because I was really rooting for them. But I think what was more fascinating for me was the fact that there was a sense of mystery around the character. So I would like to know, and I'm sure everybody that's read the book would like to know too, will there be a sequel to The Beautiful Side of the Moon?
I've actually discussed it with my publisher, yes.
If you need sequel ideas, I have some ideas. Oh. Like, we need love to flow between this one and Osarite. Since she was cuckoo feeling him at least at some point, Abby.
We'll see what happens between them. Magic might happen between them.
No, now. Okay, well, I hope so. I really can't wait. I hope so. What other projects are you working on at the moment?
Oh, so currently, so during when the pandemic happened and we were sent into lockdown, my first thought was I have to finish the book in my head before I die because I thought I was so, so I wrote an entire novel in pandemic, and then I took a break from it and from everything else. So now I'm editing that.
Okay.
Once that's been edited, I cannot wait to write the fourth Amaka book.
Hmm.
The third Amaka book comes out next month. It's called Unfinished Business.
Okay.
And the fourth one, I'm hoping I'll get away with, you know, the title Amaka. And
Mm.
it's kind of a reboot of the series, right? And there are threads throughout the first three books that will finally be resolved, or maybe not. For example, Malik is going to be a central character in the fourth Amaka book, and I'm just excited about the story. I'm excited about the third one, Unfinished Business, because it kind of sheds light on another important thing that I really want to talk about. I want people to think about this and to discuss this. And that important thing is the plague, as it were, of Pentecostal churches. A lot of these churches, have tons of poor people while the pastors fly about in private jets. They build schools from money collected from the congregation, but those schools, the congregation can afford to send their children there. I am not attacking Christianity or any religion for that matter, but even amongst real pastors or reverends or imams and all of that, you will find people that, maybe they shouldn't be doing this, but in a largely unregulated industry, and it is a business industry, people get away with a lot. People get away with, I mean, there are pastors in Nigeria who we have the receipts of, all the sexual deviance and molestation and all of that. Nothing happens to this man. No, nothing ever happens to them. And I think it's time we start looking at that a little bit more closely.
Okay.
you know and that's what the third Amaka book is about. It looks at the Jesus PLC, as it were.
Okay, speaking of writing, I'm very sure that some things you wrote in The Beautiful Side of the Moon didn't come to light during the editing process. So, what did you learn during the editing process as an author, as a writer? What did you learn about yourself during the editing process of The Beautiful Side of the Moon?
I learned that I actually enjoy editing with people, actually. So I've always enjoyed editing my own work. If you leave me with something I've written, like most writers, I believe, I will edit forever. Editing with Wida was a different experience because it was a collaboration. So it wasn't send off the manuscript, wait for it to come back. It was, we're doing this together every step of the way. We're having discussions. We're having discussions on a sentence, on a word. And I just found that I learned so much about the editing, about the skill of editing itself, because I edit as a writer, not as an editor. I learned a lot about paying close attention to what your readers might get from what you said. And a very interesting thing happened because I did, in the original manuscript, answer the riddle, which the
Okay.
entire book is a riddle. I did with what used to be the last line of the manuscript. But we edited that out. And even though there are days I wake up and think, now we should have left it in, but there are days where I wake up thinking, absolutely. You've always said, Leia, that readers are extremely intelligent people, possibly more intelligent than you, because readers will tell you stuff in your book that you didn't realize was there. They would see it, and you would be tempted once in a while to say that's a coincidence. But then when you look at the story, you realize, huh, that's true. And I think this editing process reinforced my belief in that superior intelligence of the reader as compared to the person writing the book when it comes to understanding what the story is about, finding their own meanings in the story, and putting the threads and the clues together themselves. So yeah, I learned that from the editing process, which I thoroughly enjoyed, as you know.
Aw, I'm so glad. Thank God for that. Okay, so I'm very curious because you have so many interesting characters, and when I talk to people about your book, they're always like they are so hilarious, especially Brother Moses, Titus, Adesoa, even Osaterin himself. Which one of these characters did you actually enjoy writing the most?
Osaterin, obviously.
I would have thought you would say Brother Moses.
Well, no, I was going to come to the Osaterin, obviously.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the characters were exciting. I found Titus to be very. I have it on my wall somewhere. Yeah, I have it right here. Titus, Nicolas Cage. I was just face to him. I find him to be quite interesting in a very scary kind of way. A character I really enjoyed writing, which is quite odd, really. Without giving anything away, is that character in Cool Moonfire.
Okay. Okay.
I really particularly like because I saw that character and you would understand this. I tried to give that character emotions,
Mm.
connect with.
Mm.
And yeah, I really felt that one. But Brother Moses is fun. Yeah.
I absolutely love Brother Moses. So I'm going to ask you about the names, please. Brother Moses, Titus. Why? What was going on? Why not Deji? Even your name, Adele. Why Brother Moses and Titus? Why
Well,
such names for characters?
I we do have a planet in the book called Bolanle,
Panebie, Panebolanle.
because why not? Those names are intentional and they have meaning. And if you take every element in the book, like I said, there are clues everywhere as to what the book is really about, what it's really saying, who Osaterin really is. And not just who he is, but when we if we discover who he is, it also says something about who that person is not.
Yeah.
And so the names, they're intentional. Again, if you take the book in totality and you decide to be academic about it and go look at what might be the significance of this specific name,
Mm.
this specific context, it will make more sense.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been any other name.
One thing I realized about the plot of your novel is that it's very, very fast paced. We go from a regular day in Lagos to we go through a car wash to another dimension. We go to Fakafiki, we go to the moon. What kind of preparations did you do when you were actually plotting your story? What preparations did you make? What did you do? How did you outline it?
You know, I was lucky to be in the audience when John Grisham and Lee Child, they were on stage together talking, and somebody in the audience asked them, these two great writers, like, do you plan your stories? And John Grisham, the lawyer, talked about this elaborate process he does where before he writes a single word, he has planned the characters, he has planned the sequence of the stories, the character arc, everything's planned and laid out visually before he starts writing. And thank God he does that because, I mean, he gives us amazing books all the time. My mom spent last week with me and she was reading this amazing book she kept telling me about. And when I saw the book, it was a Grisham novel. And then he came to Lee Child, and Lee Child said, I'm the opposite. I don't plan, I just start writing. And he says of his character, he says when he's writing and his main character, at the end of the chapter, the main character falls off the side of a cliff and he doesn't know how the character is going to be saved. And he says, but that's the character's problem, not mine. He's got to figure out how he's going to save himself. And I identify totally with the way Lee Child writes. You get a feel. So writers tell you about this thing, they make it sound magical, that the entire book comes to you in a second. It does. It's not magical. It's because your subconscious has been picking up all these elements and putting them together. And at some point, everything is there. And maybe what crystallizes it is when you get the title or the name of the main character or the denouement or something just tells you, boom, I got it. And that's when you become aware of this story that's been writing itself in your subconscious and it feels like it's all come to you. I believe in that piece of magic, if you will, so that when that story comes to me, sometimes it's come to me, I'm aware of it, I'm thinking about it, I'm mulling it over. And then at some point, I just start writing, and then I trust the writing process. I know what's going to happen. I know who the narrator is, even if they're not the main character. I know what the story is about. I know what's going to be revealed when. And I have a very strong idea of how it's going to end. But what I don't know is who the other characters are that are going to show up and be involved and be tangential, be important to the story. I don't know exactly what's going to happen from page to page, but I know that everything that happens that ends up on the pages of my book is only there because it moves that story along. So I get into a state called flow and I just allow flow to take over. And that's when writing becomes enjoyable because you're writing and I write thrillers, you're writing and you're also discovering what happens next as you're writing it. I don't know what Osaterin is going to do next or Amaka in the crime thriller series. So sometimes I'm writing an Amaka scene And in my head, I'm shouting at Amaka, don't go into that room. Amaka, come on, you know. And I'm thinking, is she going to go there? I'm writing it, but I'm also looking forward to finding out what happens. And I think you can only get that thrill if you're the second kind of writer that allows a story to form in a conceptual way and then allow the characters to tell the story, to become fully formed, to have agency. So they're doing what they will do. You're not making them do it. They're actually acting out who they are in terms of the story.
Okay. So in the process of trying to let everything flow and come to you naturally, didn't you get stuck at some point?
No, that's the beauty of flow. If you study flow, it's a real state. It's that state you get into when you are totally immersed in what you're doing. They claim that to be in flow, you need a little bit of challenge. You know, it's something that would slightly challenge you, but it's something you're good at and that you enjoy doing. You can see musicians, you can see jazz musicians getting into flow. You know, you can see musicians, all musicians getting into flow. And when you get into flow as a writer, you're just time ceases to exist. It's the best drug in the world. It's a high unlike any other. I don't take hard drugs, so I wouldn't know. But it's such an euphoria. It's such a you come out of that writing session, and you're just grateful to be alive, you know, and to be watching the birth of this story you're telling. Yeah. You never get stuck. That's getting stuck is something that doesn't happen in flow. You don't have what do you call it? You do not have a writer's block if you're in flow, you know. And writer's block is kind of laziness, but that's another topic.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leye. It was amazing speaking with you. This is Kaduna Book and Arts Festival 2022, and I've just finished a book chat with Mr. Leye Adenle. Thank you so much for talking with me. I'm so in love with your book, and if you want to get the book, go to any bookstore near you. And I hope you fall in love with Osaterin as much as I actually did as well.
Hello, Mr. Leye Adenle.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, nice to see you again. I'm not so happy that you're not here because I wish people could get signed copies. But it was amazing watching our video together. And I did realize that I laughed a lot talking with you. I laughed so much. Okay, so I'm going to hand over the mic to the audience that have questions for you. So they'll talk and then you answer them. So I'm going to start with Sharon. I think.
Can I just start by saying good afternoon to everybody. I really wish I was there. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. I've heard so much about the Suya KD, but one day hopefully I'll be able to attend. So apologies for not being there in person.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. So I read the book, and I can't ask many of the questions that I would like to ask without spoiling it. So I just want to say thank you for the experience. My favorite superhero is Doctor Strange, and I had many Doctor Strange moments when I was reading it. So my question as an educator goes back to upbringing. How different do you think Osaterin's character would have been if the circumstances of his upbringing were different? Let's say if his mom was more, emotional towards him, if he had gotten questions answered, if he had just been told the truth. How different do you think the character would have ended up at the end? Thank you.
That's a powerful question. The first thought that comes to me is that you know the saying, you cannot escape your destiny. So I think in a way, his mom was protecting him from not having a child. If he knew the truth about himself, if he knew some things too early on, it's like seeing the future. It's like being told this is going to happen to you. That kind of destroys it. Looking into the future alters the future, that kind of stuff. So I think it might have turned out differently. However, in this particular story, was, and we turned out the way it did.
Thank you very much, Leye. So the next person.
My name is Leke. I'm a huge fan. I love all your books. I love not just your stories, but how you write. I have a simple question. Our mysticism in Africa, we do not try to understand it. We shroud it in a lot of secrecy because it gives power to those institutions. So your stories, most times, there's a recurring theme. You tend to explore mystical aspects and then try to explain it. It was also one of the themes in Easy Motion Tourist, or one of your books where it was about rituals, and then in the end it was people opening up people and selling organs. For you to write mystical stories, how much of research do you have to do? That's my question. And does it involve you actually speaking to magicians, for instance, or visiting shrines? No, I'm really interested, and what's the experience like if you do that, or it's just about you reading books and then recollecting stuff from your memories? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Leke. Again, it hurts me that I'm not there. I would have loved to meet you and carried on this discussion for a lot longer. Did I have to do a lot of research to be able to write magic? Well, I'm a magician. I can show you a magic trick, but I don't want to scare the easily scared people in the audience. I didn't talk to specific magicians. I spoke to one magician who is a member of the Magic Circle, and trying to get anything out of him is like trying to get the truth out of a politician. There's sworn to secrecy and all of that. That said, I wasn't dwelling too much on the magic, and the magic in the book itself was only what people would think of what they encountered. It is magical until you understand how it's done. So I didn't actually, I'm not allowed to tell you about the magicians I spoke to, basically.
Thank you very much, Leke. Next person.
Good afternoon. Mr. Leke, you are incredible actually. We we learn a lot from you, and my question here is what motivations will you give to young writers like us on like success of your writings is actually very great. So we'd like to hear maybe some of like advice to young writers like us who, if we follow your footsteps, will make success like you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So what advice would I give other writers? It's very simple. I would say read, write. And, just don't try to write what people want you to write. Write what you would enjoy reading. If you're going to be a writer, I expect that you're already a reader, which is what makes us all writers. We read books and then one day we feel like, I can do better than that, or I can do something similar. And that joy you get from reading, that's the joy I get from writing. And I have a theory that you can tell if a writer enjoyed the process of writing the book because you'd see it in the writing. So if there was one piece of advice I could give, apart from read, write, it'll be just enjoy it, have fun.
Thank you very much. Mr. Leye, good afternoon. Please, I would like to ask, in this modern society where we face many challenges unrelated to magic, so if I may ask, please, what's the place of magic in this modern society, especially here in Nigeria? Thank you.
Wow, that's a very powerful question. That's one of the most mind-blowing questions I've ever heard. What's the place of magic in a modern society like Nigeria? That's so powerful that I can even use it for so many other things. What's the place of religion in a country like Nigeria? What's the place for politics in a place like Nigeria? Why do we have all these Pentecostal churches in a place like Nigeria? I think magic, or what we call magic, is part of the experience of being human. You will find that I don't, like a lot of writers, I don't set out to, I don't have a message. I'm not trying to say something or the other. So the elements in my books are not necessarily aimed at doing something, profound. They're really about entertaining. Now, by being truthful to that because I understand that my job is to entertain, right? And that's my job. So my writing is to entertain. Now, if I'm truthful to what I'm doing, if I write about magic, it might have a message for someone simply because I'm being truthful to my own human experiences and the imagined experiences of the characters in my book. They become real. They become 3D in my mind, you see? So they all have agency. They're based on, what I know about other people's situations I know. So if there's an element of magic in there, it might speak to someone. If there's an element of religion in there, it might speak to someone. If there's an element of love, it might speak to someone. But that question you've asked me, I would love if you appreciate how I've skillfully avoided it because it's too tough to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leye Adenle. It's been amazing having you here at Kabafest 2022. Bye.
Thank you very much, Leye.